The letter arrived on an October morning, bringing with it the promise of change. Clara held the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of those words even before reading them. It was a marriage proposal from a prosperous rancher from the countryside, someone she had never met in person. Her heart beat faster, not with joy, but with a mixture of hope and fear. When her stepmother, Margaret, snatched the letter from her hands, the silence of the room transformed into an explosion. Laughter echoed through the mansion walls like invisible knives. Her half-brother, Thomas, doubled over laughing, pointing at Clara's face with blatant cruelty. "You? Get married?" Margaret wiped imaginary tears from her eyes, her voice loaded with venom. This man must be blind or completely desperate. Who would want a woman marked like that? Clara instinctively touched the scars that ran down the left side of her face, descending down her neck until they disappeared under the simple dress she wore. They were deep marks, pinkish and irregular, permanent reminders of that terrible night 5 years ago. For her family, these scars were a source of shame. For Clara, they were the price she paid for doing the right thing. But could anyone besides her see that? "He probably doesn't even know what you're really like," Margaret continued, waving the letter in the air. "He must have only seen that old painting from when you were still presentable." The words hurt more than any physical burn. Clara felt the familiar lump form in her throat, but refused to let the tears fall. Not in front of them. Never in front of them. "You know what?" Thomas approached, his eyes shining with malice. "I think we should accept the proposal. It would be hilarious to see his face when you get there." Margaret paused, and Clara saw the exact moment when the idea formed in her stepmother's perverse mind. A cruel smile spread across her painted lips. "You're right, my son. What a brilliant idea." She looked at Clara with calculated contempt. "We'll accept on your behalf, dear stepdaughter. You're going to marry this rancher, and when he rejects you, you'll finally understand your place in this world." Clara's heart plummeted. This wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap. A cruel plan to humiliate her even more. But what if? What if there was a chance, however small, of finding someone who saw beyond the scars? Someone who could see her true beauty, the one that lived hidden beneath the marks and fear? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should love you? Clara knew this pain well. While Margaret drafted the response accepting the proposal, Clara looked out the window at the distant fields. Somewhere, beyond those hills, was a man named Daniel Morrison, a farmer who, for some mysterious reason, had asked for her hand without ever having seen her in person. Would he be different? Or would he be just another disappointment in a life already full of them? The resilience Clara had cultivated over the years would be tested again. But this time, maybe, just maybe, something different awaited her. The following days were a mixture of forced preparation and constant mockery. Margaret made a point of turning the process into an elaborate farce, orchestrating every detail to maximize Clara's future humiliation. "Let's give her a decent dress, at least," Margaret declared one afternoon, while seamstresses circled around Clara in the living room. "We can't let them think we sent her shabby. The joke needs to be perfect." The seamstresses worked in embarrassed silence, measuring and pinning fabric while Thomas leaned back in the armchair, watching with perverse entertainment. "Maybe we should make a dress with a high collar," he suggested, feigning concern. "To hide the imperfections?" "No," Margaret interrupted with a calculating smile. "Leave it on full display. I want this Daniel Morrison to see exactly what he's getting. The surprise will be even better." Clara remained motionless like a statue, letting the cruel words slide off her like water. She had learned, over the years, to build invisible walls around her heart. Each malicious comment was another brick in that protection. But deep down, kept somewhere safe, a stubborn hope still pulsed. That night, alone in her modest attic room, Clara reread the original letter. The handwriting was firm, masculine, direct. "Miss Clara Whitmore, I learned through mutual acquaintances about your family situation. I am a landowner of fertile lands and seek a companion who values simple life and honest work. If you accept, I will send a carriage to fetch you next month. Sincerely, Daniel Morrison." There were no promises of love or romantic words. It was practical, almost commercial. But there was something in those lines that intrigued Clara. How had he known about her? Who were these mutual acquaintances? And why choose her, among so many available women in the region? Probably no one else wanted to marry him, Thomas muttered when she dared to ask these questions during dinner. He must be old, ugly, or both. Perfect for you. The whole family laughed, except Clara's father, who remained silent at the head of the table as he always did. Since marrying Margaret 3 years after Clara's real mother's death, he had become a shadow of the man he once was. He didn't defend his daughter, but he also didn't participate in the cruelties. He was absence in human form. Father? Clara tried, her voice almost a whisper. Won't you say anything about this? He raised his tired eyes briefly, then returned them to his plate. Maybe it's for the best, Clara. Maybe this marriage is a new opportunity. Margaret let out a shrill laugh. Opportunity. What a lovely word to describe an exile. But Clara caught something different in her father's tone. Was it pity, guilt, or just the resignation of someone who had given up fighting? She couldn't decide which hurt more. What would you do if your own family plotted against you? Clara asked herself this question countless times as the days passed. And each time, she came to the same conclusion. She would go. She would go because staying there was dying slowly. She would go because, deep down, part of her wanted to believe that the scars didn't define her destiny. She would go because her resilience, built through so much suffering, deserved a chance to flourish. On the night before departure, Margaret entered Clara's room without knocking. Tomorrow you leave, she said, arms crossed. And when you return shamed and rejected, I hope you finally understand your place. People like you don't deserve happiness, Clara. Your scars are proof of that. After Margaret left, Clara looked at herself in the foggy mirror. The scars seemed to shine in the candlelight. But was it possible that someone, somewhere, saw in them not deformity, but courage? Not ugliness, but true beauty of a different kind? Tomorrow she would find out. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Clara carried those marks, and with them, a story that no one wanted to hear. But to understand who she really was, it was necessary to go back to that December night that changed everything. Before the fire, Clara Whitmore was 18 years old with a promising future. She was beautiful by society's standards, educated, skilled at the piano, destined for a good marriage. Her mother had just passed away after a long illness, and her father, lost in grief, barely noticed his daughter. Then came Margaret, a widow with a son the same age as Clara. The marriage was quick, convenient, and everything changed. But the real transformation happened on that fatal night. The family was staying at an inn during a trip. Clara woke up to the smell of smoke, flames already consuming the hallway. In the next room, a child was crying, the young daughter of the inn's owners, forgotten in the chaos of evacuation. Would you hesitate? Clara didn't hesitate. While everyone fled, she went back. She crossed the flaming hallway, found the terrified girl under the bed, took her in her arms and ran. A burning beam collapsed on them the moment they passed through the door. Clara protected the child with her own body. She saved the girl's life, almost lost her own, and gained scars that would mark her face and left arm forever. It was reckless and selfish, Margaret said when Clara was still recovering, bandaged and sedated. Now, look at you. Who's going to want to marry a woman marked like that? You ruined your chances for a child who wasn't even ours. But Clara didn't regret it. Even through the pain, even seeing her transformed reflection, she didn't regret it. She had saved a life. If that had a price, she would pay it. In the following years, Clara learned to live in the shadows. Where before she was included in balls and social dinners, now she was hidden. Margaret invented excuses. She's sick. She traveled. She's not presentable. The truth was that a disfigured stepdaughter was a social embarrassment. Clara began to occupy her days differently. She worked in the garden, where no one saw her. She voraciously read books from the family library. And, secretly, she visited the local orphanage where she helped with the children. They didn't care about her scars. For them, Miss Clara was just the kind lady who told stories and brought sweets. It was at the orphanage that her true beauty really flourished, away from society's judgmental eyes. There, her scars were almost a badge of honor. The children touched them with reverence, calling her a real hero. With them, Clara laughed. With them, she was complete. One day someone will see you as we see you, Sister Catherine, who ran the orphanage, told her. Someone who sees beyond the surface. Clara wanted to believe, but after 3 years being treated like a monster in her own house, belief was difficult. Still, she fed that tiny flame of hope. The same resilience that led her back into the fire to save a child now kept her standing day after day. She learned to sew and mended clothes for the orphanage children. She learned about medicinal herbs and cared for the sick. She developed practical skills that no society lady possessed. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to feel useful, necessary, alive. At night, before sleeping, Clara sometimes ran her fingers over the scars and murmured, "You made the right choice. You saved a life. That means something. You mean something." It was her mantra, her anchor. Then came Daniel Morrison's letter, and with it, a terrifying possibility. What if she had to prove her worth one more time? And what if, this time, it wasn't enough? What Clara didn't know, as the carriage took her along the dusty road to Morrison Ranch, was that Daniel already knew her story. Every detail. Every scar had a story he had already heard. Let's go back 6 months before the letter. Daniel Morrison was in a tavern in Richmond, closing a cattle deal, when he overheard a conversation at the next table. 2 men were discussing the Whitmore family's disgrace. "Margaret is mortified," one of them said. "The stepdaughter is practically a recluse now. Horrible scars, they say. No one wants to marry her." "What a waste," commented the other. "I heard she was a beautiful girl before, but she was disfigured saving a child from a fire. Brave, but foolish." Daniel normally didn't interfere in gossip, but something in those words hooked him. A girl who had sacrificed her appearance to save a life? That wasn't foolishness. It was true love in action. It was exactly the kind of character he was looking for. In the following days, Daniel investigated discreetly. He discovered more than he expected. He discovered that Clara visited the orphanage regularly despite the family's disapproval. He discovered that she donated most of her small allowance to the children. He discovered that, even being treated as a pariah in her own home, she maintained dignity and kindness. And he discovered something more, something that Margaret didn't know, but that would change everything. The girl Clara saved that night? She was his niece, Sarah Morrison, daughter of his younger brother, Michael, who ran that inn with his wife. Michael had died 2 years later in an accident, but before that, he had told the story of the girl who saved his daughter countless times. "She was an angel, Daniel," Michael had said on his deathbed. "She went back into the fire when everyone was fleeing. She protected Sarah with her own body. Please, if you can ever thank her, thank her. She's the reason my daughter is alive." Daniel promised, and now he had the chance to fulfill it. But there was more. When Daniel discreetly saw a sketch of Clara made by a local artist at the orphanage, something moved in his chest. Even with the scars honestly drawn, there was a beauty in that face. Not the superficial beauty he had always despised, but something deeper. Strength, kindness, pure resilience. "It's her," he murmured to himself. "She's the woman I'm looking for." Daniel Morrison was 32 years old and had never married. Not for lack of options. His prosperous ranch and good reputation attracted suitors. But they all seemed to value him only for money or status. None possessed the depth of character he sought. He grew up seeing true love between his parents, a love based on respect, partnership, shared values. He wanted no less. And Clara Whitmore, with her scars and silent courage, seemed to embody exactly what his heart yearned for. That's why he wrote the letter. That's why he made the proposal. Not as an act of charity, but as a recognition of true beauty when he finally found it. What Daniel didn't anticipate was that Clara's family would use his request as a weapon of humiliation. He imagined she would come because she wanted to, not because she was being forced as part of a cruel plan. This complicated things. As Daniel awaited Clara's arrival that November morning, he checked the ranch for the 10th time. Everything was perfect. The main house, built by his grandfather, gleamed with cleanliness. The field stretched green and prosperous. The horses grazed peacefully. It was a good place. A place where someone with scars, physical or emotional, could heal. "She's coming," announced Sam, his foreman, pointing to the road. Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment. The girl who saved his niece, who faced the fire without hesitation, who continued being kind despite her family's cruelty, was about to arrive. And he was determined to show her that not everyone saw only scars when they looked at her. But would Clara be able to believe that? Would she be able to accept that someone valued her exactly as she was? The carriage stopped in front of the main house, and Clara felt her heart race. This was the moment. There was no turning back. Through the dusty window, she saw a tall man emerge from the porch. Brown hair slightly disheveled by the wind, broad shoulders of someone who worked the land, face marked by the sun but surprisingly young. This was Daniel Morrison? She expected someone older, perhaps less attractive. The discrepancy between her expectations and reality made her even more nervous. The coachman opened the door, and Clara descended, keeping the marked side of her face slightly turned, an automatic habit developed in recent years. The countryside wind played with her simple skirt, carrying the smell of wet earth and horses. "So different from the city, Miss Whitmore?" Daniel's voice was deep, but gentle. "Yes," Clara replied softly, forcing herself to look at him. "Mr. Morrison, I—" The words died when their eyes met. Daniel was looking at her in a way she didn't recognize. There was no repulsion. There was no shock. He looked at her, really at her, as if he were seeing a complete person, not just walking scars. "Welcome to Morrison Ranch," he said, approaching and extending his hand. Was the trip tiring? Clara hesitated, then placed her gloved hand in his. The grip was firm, respectful. It was smooth. "Thank you." A strange silence settled in. Clara expected. What? Horror? Disappointment? But Daniel simply smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Let me help you with the bags," he offered, waving to Sam. "Mrs. Chun, our cook, prepared lunch. I imagine you're hungry." He didn't mention the scars, nor did he pretend not to see them. He just accepted, as if they were a natural part of who she was, not her defining characteristic. Clara didn't know how to process this. As they walked to the house, Daniel talked about the ranch. "We have 200 head of cattle, wheat fields in that direction, a vegetable garden that Mrs. Chen maintains with obsessive pride. It's a simple life, but honest." "It sounds beautiful," Clara murmured, observing the vastness of the place. And it was. There was a peace there that she had never felt at the Whitmore mansion. Space to breathe. Infinite horizon. The interior of the house surprised Clara. It was rustic but welcoming, with solid wood furniture, the smell of fresh bread and wildflowers in simple vases. Nothing luxurious, but everything made with care. "I prepared the front room for you," Daniel explained, indicating a door. "It has a view of the fields. I thought you might like it." "Thank you," Clara said, genuinely touched. "It's more than I expected." "What did you expect?" Daniel asked softly. Clara hesitated. Honesty or caution? Something in his calm gaze made her choose truth. "I expected immediate rejection, if I'm to be frank. My family sent me as a kind of joke." Something darkened in Daniel's eyes. "Joke?" "They thought it was funny that someone asked me to marry them," Clara continued, the words coming out faster now. "Margaret, my stepmother, accepted on my behalf just to see your reaction when you saw me in person. I'll understand if you want me to leave." "You don't have to, Clara." Daniel gently interrupted, using her first name for the first time. "May I call you Clara?" She nodded, mute. "Clara, I know exactly what you look like. I made a point of knowing before writing that letter." He took a deep breath. "And I didn't ask you to marry me despite your scars. I asked because I knew what they represent. Courage, Sacrifice. That kind of true beauty that isn't easily found. The air seemed to leave Clara's lungs. You knew. I know you saved a child from a fire, Daniel continued, his voice loaded with emotion. I know you almost died protecting her. And I know that child was my niece, Sarah. The world spun. Clara held onto the edge of the table. What? Michael Morrison was my younger brother, Daniel explained. The inn was his. Sarah, she's 10 years old now, and she's alive because you were brave when no one else was. Tears burned in Clara's eyes. 5 years. 5 years carrying those marks, feeling monstrous. And now she discovered that the man before her saw in them not ugliness, but heroism. You don't owe me anything, Clara whispered. I did what anyone would do. No, Daniel interrupted firmly. You did what few would do. And I owe everything. But it wasn't out of duty that I wrote that letter, Clara. It was because, when I researched you, I discovered someone extraordinary. Someone who continued being kind even when treated cruelly. Someone with a resilience that I deeply admire. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't process. After years being treated as an aberration, standing before someone who saw value in her was surprisingly difficult to accept. Have you ever received the acceptance you so expected and didn't know how to react? Daniel took a step back, giving her space. You don't have to decide anything now. Stay. Get to know the ranch. Get to know me. And then, if you want to leave, I'll understand. But please, give yourself the chance to see that there are people who recognize your true worth. And in that moment, something began to crack in the walls Clara had built around her heart. The first days at the ranch were a constant revelation. Clara woke up early, not out of obligation, but because the sounds of the farm, birds, horses, wind in the trees, were an irresistible call. So different from the hostile silences of the Whitmore mansion. Mrs. Chun, a Chinese lady of indefinable age and dry humor, treated Clara's scars with practical indifference from the first moment. Good hands for cooking? She asked on the second day. Then come help me. I don't like idle people. Working in the kitchen alongside Mrs. Chun, Clara discovered a simple pleasure in practical activities. Kneading bread, chopping vegetables, preparing preserves. Her hands, once occupied only with useless embroidery, now created something concrete and necessary. You're good at this, Mrs. Chun commented one day, watching Clara prepare apple pies. Not like those city girls who don't even know how to crack an egg. The comment, seemingly simple, warmed Clara's chest. To be good at something. To be useful. It was a feeling she had forgotten. Daniel, in turn, maintained a respectful distance, but was always present. He met with her during meals, walked with her through the fields at dusk, showed her the animals. And more importantly, he talked. You mentioned you visited an orphanage, he said one afternoon as they watched the horses. Did you enjoy that work? Clara's eyes lit up. I loved it. The children, they don't judge. They just love and are loved. There's a school in the nearby village, Daniel commented casually. They always need help. If you want. Really? The hope in Clara's voice was palpable. Of course. You're not a prisoner here, Clara. You can come and go as you wish. You can work, study, do whatever makes your heart happy. It was such a foreign concept that Clara took a moment to process. Freedom. True freedom. One afternoon, Daniel took her to a remote part of the ranch. There, in a small family cemetery, was Michael Morrison's grave. And beside it, recently planted, a blooming rose bush. I promised him I would thank you, Daniel said softly. But words seem insufficient. How do you thank someone for giving back a child's life? Clara touched the soft petals of a rose. You don't have to. Seeing that she's well, that she had a chance to live, that's already enough. Daniel observed her, and in that moment, something changed in his gaze. Admiration slowly transforming into something deeper. You're extraordinary, you know? Clara blushed, instinctively turning her face away. I'm not. I just did the right thing. Exactly. Daniel gently touched her scarred arm, making her look at him. Doing the right thing even when it costs everything. That's true resilience. That's beauty that doesn't fade. That night, Clara wrote in her diary for the first time in years. Maybe Margaret was wrong. Maybe my scars aren't my end, but my beginning. Maybe true beauty is exactly this. Marks that prove you survived, that you fought, that you loved more than you feared. As the weeks passed, Clara flourished. Her posture straightened. Her smile appeared more easily. She stopped hiding her face, leaving her scars visible without shame. Because here, on this ranch, they were seen for what they really were, emblems of courage. Daniel noticed every change. He saw how she laughed with the children at the school where she now volunteered twice a week. He saw how she cared for sick animals with infinite gentleness. He saw how she became more herself. The person she had always been inside, finally free to manifest. One night, after a particularly cheerful dinner where Mrs. Chen complained affectionately about them both and Sam told ridiculous stories about past disasters on the ranch, Daniel walked with Clara to the porch. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. "Of course." "Do you regret it? The fire, the scars, everything?" Clara thought carefully before responding. 3 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now... She gently touched the scars on her face. "Now I see that they brought me here, made me who I am, taught me about resilience, about real value, about what matters. So no, I don't regret it." Daniel gently held her hand. "I'm starting to think that letter was the best decision I ever made. Even though your intention was to pay a debt? Clara, look at me." When she did, Daniel continued. "It started as gratitude, but it became something more. You became something more. And each day that passes, I'm more certain that it wasn't a coincidence that you entered my life." Clara's heart beat faster. Could it be possible? Could it be possible that someone really loved her, not despite the scars, but including them? Not as charity, but as genuine choice? Do you believe that true love can see beyond imperfections? It was Sarah who precipitated the true transformation. Daniel brought her to visit the ranch on a sunny December afternoon, and when the 10-year-old girl got out of the carriage, Clara felt time stop. Blonde hair in braids, curious blue eyes, a shy smile. Sarah was the child she had saved, now grown, alive, radiant. Living proof that that terrible night had meant something. "Uncle Daniel said you're here," Sarah murmured, approaching slowly. "The lady who saved me." Clara knelt to be at the girl's height, tears already welling up. "Sarah, you're so big." "I remember you," Sarah said softly, extending her small hand to touch the scars on Clara's face. "Your arms held me. You protected me when everything was burning. I was so scared, but you weren't." "I was terrified," Clara confessed with a wet smile. "But you needed me, so I went." Sarah threw her arms around Clara's neck, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for your scars. They mean I can be here." Something broke inside Clara at that moment. All the years of shame, of hiding, of believing that her scars were punishment, everything crumbled before that pure and innocent gratitude. She hugged Sarah back, sobbing, finally letting all the pain and rejection flow out. Daniel watched from the porch, his own eyes moist. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment when Clara would finally see herself through the eyes of those who loved her, not as marked, but as magnificent. "Are you going to marry Uncle Daniel?" Sarah asked afterward, with typical childlike frankness. "He likes you a lot. I can see it." Clara looked at Daniel, who blushed slightly, but didn't look away. We haven't decided that yet. But you like him too," Sarah insisted with a mischievous smile. "I can see that too." And it was true. At some point in the last few weeks, without Clara fully realizing it, her heart had begun to recognize what her eyes saw every day. Daniel wasn't just kind or grateful. He was good, genuinely good. And the way he looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world, had awakened something she believed was dead. Love. True, frightening, transformative love. That night, after Sarah left with promises to return soon, Daniel found Clara in the garden, where she was watching the stars. Thank you for bringing her, Clara said softly. Seeing Sarah was like closing a circle that had been open for 5 years. She wanted to meet you for a long time, Daniel replied, approaching. But I was waiting for the right moment. I wanted you to already be at home here. I am, Clara confessed, surprising herself. More at home than I ever was at the Whitmore mansion. This place, you make me feel like I can be myself. You were always free to be yourself, Clara. The problem was never you. It was the people around you who couldn't see your true beauty. Clara turned to face him completely. Daniel, I need to ask, and I need you to be honest. Do you really want me here? Not out of duty or gratitude, but because you genuinely want to. Daniel took a step forward, taking both her hands. Clara Whitmore, every day you spend on this ranch, I fall a little more in love. With your laughter in the kitchen, with Mrs. Chen, with the way you care for the animals, with the way you light up an entire room when you enter, with your strength, your kindness, your incredible resilience. He gently touched the scars on her face. These marks, I see them for what they are, proof of a love so great that you risked everything for a child. How could I not fall in love with someone like that? But I'm marked, Clara whispered, old fears still whispering. No, Daniel corrected firmly. You're remarkable. There's a difference. You leave a mark on everyone who knows you because your kindness, your courage, your inner beauty are impossible to ignore. Clara felt the tears flow freely now. In my family, they told me so many times that I was undesirable, that no one would ever love me. Then your family was blind, Daniel interrupted. And if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving they were wrong. Daniel, marry me, he said, his voice loaded with emotion. Not because I wrote a letter months ago, not out of duty, but because I love you, Clara. I love who you are, what you represent, and I want to build a life by your side. Clara's heart beat so hard, she was sure he could hear it. Are you sure? When people see your scars next to me, let them see, Daniel said passionately. Let the whole world see that Daniel Morrison had the luck and privilege of being chosen by an extraordinary woman. A woman whose scars tell a story of heroism that I will proudly tell until my last day. Clara looked at that man, so different from everything she had known. A man who saw her scars not as a defect, but as part of the story that made her who she was. A man who offered not pity, but equal and genuine love. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to marry you. Daniel pulled her into an embrace, and for the first time in 5 years, Clara allowed herself to be completely vulnerable. She rested her head on his chest, feeling his heart beat strongly, and allowed herself to believe. Believe that she was loved. Believe that she deserved this. Believe that her scars didn't define her worth, her character did. And that her true beauty, the one that had lived hidden for so long, finally had space to shine. There, under the countryside stars, two souls found in love the healing they both sought. The wedding was set for the following spring, a simple ceremony at the village church. Clara wanted something intimate, only with the people who really mattered: Mrs. Chun, Sam, the school children, Sarah, and her adoptive family. There was no need for grandeur. There was only need for true love, and that they had in abundance. But 3 weeks before the scheduled date, an elegant carriage arrived at Morrison Ranch. The Whitmore family crest shone on the side. Clara felt her stomach tighten when she saw Margaret descend, followed by Thomas. Her father remained inside the carriage, as always, avoiding confrontation. So it's true, Margaret said without any greeting, her eyes sweeping the ranch with barely disguised disdain. You're really going to marry this farmer? Rancher, Clara corrected calmly, surprising herself with her own firmness. And yes, I am. Daniel emerged from the house at that moment, positioning himself beside Clara. His presence was comforting, solid. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, he said politely, but without warmth. This is an unexpected visit. We came to get Clara, Thomas announced with arrogance. This little game has lasted long enough. Game? Clara's voice was low but loaded with something new: anger. You sent me here as a joke, remember? To humiliate me. Margaret had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Well, circumstances have changed. You need to come home. Why? Daniel asked, his eyes narrowing. What really brought you here? A tense silence. Then Thomas, always the less subtle, revealed. Our business had setbacks. We need to make an advantageous matrimonial alliance, and it happens that Colonel Ashford has shown interest in Clara. Interest? Clara repeated, incredulous. Colonel Ashford is 60 years old and extremely wealthy, Margaret retorted. Rich enough to save the family finances. So you're going to break off this absurd engagement and fulfill your duty. The audacity was shocking. After years of cruelty, of treating her like a monster, now they wanted to use her as bargaining chip? Clara felt anger boil, but it was Daniel who spoke first. I think you didn't understand, he said with a dangerous calm. Clara is not your property. She's a free woman who made her own decision. And that decision is to stay here with me. You have no idea who you're talking to, Thomas advanced threateningly. We're a respectable family. You're just a. Careful with the next words, Daniel interrupted, his voice still calm, but with underlying steel. Clara told me everything. How you treated her. How you hit her. How you turned her act of heroism into a reason for shame. Margaret paled. She exaggerated. She didn't exaggerate at all, Clara interrupted, her own voice gaining strength. And you know what? I'm grateful you sent me here. I'm grateful for the cruelty, for the rejection, because it brought me to the only place where I'm truly valued. You're being dramatic, Margaret huffed. Your scars, my scars, Clara cut her off, represent the best thing I ever did. I saved a life. And these marks led me to someone who sees true beauty, not superficiality. Someone who understands that resilience and character are worth more than a pretty face. This is ridiculous, Thomas mocked. Do you really think this love will last? When he gets tired of playing the hero savior? I'm not saving anyone, Daniel said firmly. Clara doesn't need to be saved. She's the strongest person I know. I'm just smart enough to recognize that. Margaret tried another approach, turning to Clara with false softness. Think of your father, dear. He's ill. The failing business stresses him. If you make this marriage with the Colonel... My father, Clara said with sadness, didn't defend me once in 5 years. He watched silently while you turned me into a pariah. I'm sorry about his illness, but I won't sacrifice my happiness for someone who never sacrificed anything for me. It was liberating. Each word was a shackle breaking. Clara realized she had spent so much time seeking their approval, trying to be worthy of love, when the problem had never been her. The problem had always been them, their inability to see beyond the surface, to value what really mattered. You need to leave, Daniel said with finality. And don't come back. Clara made her decision, and I will support her completely. You're going to regret this, Margaret hissed at Clara. When the novelty passes, when he realizes the mistake. The only mistake, Clara interrupted with surprising calm, would be to go back with you. Here I'm loved. I'm valued. I'm free. And I won't trade that for anything. Margaret and Thomas finally realized they had lost. With faces red with anger and humiliation, they returned to the carriage. Before getting in, Margaret turned one last time. Don't come looking for us when everything falls apart. I don't intend to, Clara replied softly. Goodbye, Margaret. The carriage left in a cloud of dust, and with it, the last vestiges of power the Whitmore family had over Clara. She watched until they disappeared on the horizon, and then took a deep breath, the lightest and freest air she had ever breathed. Daniel wrapped her in his arms. You were amazing. I was terrified, Clara confessed. But you stood firm. That's what matters. He kissed her forehead softly. You're free now, Clara. Truly free. And she was. Free from rejection. Free from shame. Free to love and be loved exactly as she was. The scars remained, but now they were just part of her story, not the complete story. And what a magnificent story she was writing now. Have you ever had to choose between pleasing your family or following your heart? Spring arrived, painting Morrison Ranch with vibrant colors. Wildflowers covered the fields, birds built nests in the trees, and a renewed energy filled the air. It was the perfect setting for a new beginning. The wedding morning dawned clear and sunny. Clara woke up in the guest room for the last time. The next night, it would be in the room she would share with Daniel. The thought made her nervous and excited at the same time. Mrs. Chen entered carrying a tray. "Important day. You eat." The dress wasn't elaborate. Clara didn't want anything ostentatious. It was simple, white linen, with delicate lace long sleeves. But when Sarah saw her coming down the stairs, the girl sighed, "You look beautiful." And Clara felt beautiful, not because the scars had disappeared. They still marked her face and arm, pinkish and visible, but because, for the first time, she didn't see them as a defect. They were part of her journey, part of who she was. And the woman in the mirror, strong, confident, loved, was someone she finally recognized and valued. The ceremony at the small village church was intimate and perfect. The children from the school, where Clara volunteered, filled the pews, holding wildflowers. Sam was there, embarrassed in his new suit. Mrs. Chen wiped away tears she would deny later. Sarah held the rings with adorable seriousness. And Daniel, when Clara entered the church, his eyes lit up in a way she would never forget. There was no doubt, no hesitation, just pure and deep love. "Did you prepare vows?" the priest asked gently. Daniel held Clara's hands and began, his voice firm and clear. "Clara, I knew your courage before I knew your face. I heard about your kindness before I witnessed your beauty. And every day since you arrived at the ranch confirmed what my heart already knew, that you are exactly the partner I always dreamed of. I promise to honor you, protect you when necessary, but mainly, I promise to always see you as you really are. A woman of extraordinary resilience, of unconditional love, of true beauty that transcends any scar. I promise to spend my life making you feel as loved as you deserve." Clara needed to take a deep breath before responding, tears already flowing. "Daniel, you found me when I was broken. You didn't fix me, you helped me realize I was never broken, just invisible to people who didn't know how to see. You saw my scars and recognized them for what they are, marks of love and sacrifice. I promise to be your partner in everything. I promise to build a life of honesty, work and joy by your side. And I promise never to forget that you taught me the most important lesson, that true beauty is in how we love, not in how we look." There wasn't a dry eye in the church. Even the priest needed to clear his throat before continuing. The rings were exchanged, vows were sealed, and when Daniel kissed his wife for the first time, it was with a tenderness that took Clara's breath away. This was the love she deserved, that she had always deserved. The celebration at the ranch was lively and cheerful. Mrs. Chen outdid herself with a banquet that would feed an army. Sam played guitar surprisingly well. The children ran through the fields, laughing and playing. Sarah didn't leave Clara's side, radiant with happiness. When the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Daniel took Clara away from the party, to the top of a hill that offered a view of the entire ranch. "This is our place now," he said, wrapping her from behind. "Our life. Our story." Clara leaned on him, looking at the land that was now her home. "I never imagined it would be possible to be this happy. After everything that happened, I thought happiness like this was for other people." "You deserved this more than anyone," Daniel murmured against her hair. "And I'll spend every day proving it." "You've already proved it." Clara turned to face him. "You gave me something no one else gave, permission to love myself. To see my scars not as punishment, but as proof that I survived, that I'm strong, that I'm capable of great love." Daniel gently traced the scars on her face. "These marks tell a better story than any fairy tale. A real story of courage and sacrifice. How could I not fall in love with that?" They kissed as the sun disappeared on the horizon, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: complete peace. She no longer needed to hide. She no longer needed to prove her worth. She was loved. She was free. She was complete. In the following months, Morrison Ranch flourished in unexpected ways. Clara transformed part of the property into a small satellite orphanage, working with Sister Catherine to give needy children a safe place on weekends. Daniel expanded the business, but always made a point of being home for dinner, where they shared stories of the day. Sarah became a regular visitor, bringing childlike joy and constantly reminding Clara why her scars were worth every second of pain. And on a starry night, 7 months after the wedding, Clara shared news with Daniel. "We're going to have a baby." His joy was explosive. He spun her in the air, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby? Our family is growing." "I hope he has your features," Clara said afterward, caressing her still flat belly. "I hope he has your courage," Daniel replied, kissing her. "And if he has your marks, I'll love him even more, because it will mean he inherited your heroic heart." Clara realized then the fundamental truth that had changed her life. True love doesn't ignore imperfections. It doesn't tolerate them. It doesn't accept them despite. True love sees them as an integral part of the loved person, every scar, every flaw, every broken and mended piece, and loves all of it completely. The scars remained. They always would. But now they were just part of the landscape of an extraordinary life. A life of love, of resilience, of true beauty discovered in the most unexpected places. And when Clara Morrison, yes, Morrison now, looked in the mirror, she no longer saw a marked woman. She saw a survivor, a heroine, a wife, soon a mother. She saw someone who went through fire, literally and metaphorically, and emerged not destroyed, but forged into something stronger. That was the true story. Not of a rancher saving a rejected girl, but of two people meeting at the right time, recognizing in each other the reflection of their own values, and choosing to build something beautiful together. Love didn't fix Clara. Love helped her realize she never needed to be fixed. And when Clara Morrison looked in the mirror now, she no longer saw a marked woman. She saw a survivor, a heroine, a wife, and soon a mother. She saw someone who went through fire and emerged not destroyed, but transformed into something stronger. The scars remained, but now they were just part of the landscape of an extraordinary life, built with love, resilience, and true beauty. Daniel never tired of saying she was the best decision of his life. Sarah grew up always visiting, bringing her own children years later to meet Aunt Clara. Mrs. Chin continued complaining affectionately, while Clara cooked by her side. And the orphanage they created together helped dozens of children find homes full of love. The Whitmore family never appeared again. Clara learned, years later, that her father had passed away and that Margaret had lost everything in bad financial decisions. She felt pity, but not regret. Her life was where it should have always been, beside those who truly loved her. Clara and Daniel had 3 children, each inheriting their mother's kindness and their father's strength. And when the little ones asked about the scars on Mommy's face, she told the story with pride. The story of how she saved a life and, without knowing it, also saved her own. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel now, turn on the notification bell, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment. Which scars made you stronger? Give that powerful like to support Blaze. This is our first video, and in the next ones, we'll recommend the previous one. Join us on this mission of stories that transform lives. Thank you for being here.